I had always prided myself on being the responsible one. While my friends were out partying or taking spontaneous trips to Europe, I was the one with my head down, working late nights at the office, putting money aside, and building something for myself. It wasn't glamorous, but it was solid. And after a few years of grueling effort, I was starting to see the fruits of that labor. I had a promotion on the horizon, a comfortable apartment that felt like home, and even a savings account that was finally growing in the direction I wanted. My sister, on the other hand, seemed to live in a constant state of chaos. At 28, she was still living with our parents, bouncing from one job to the next, never really committing to anything long-term. I couldn't blame her entirely. She was younger after all, and still figuring things out. But the truth was, I'd always felt like I had to prove myself to our family. I was the one who made the sacrifices and worked towards stability, while she floated along, unburdened by responsibility. I wasn't resentful of her at first, it was just the way things were. But over the years, I began to feel like I was playing catch-up. Everyone in our family was always so concerned with what my sister was doing. She was fun, she was spontaneous, and she had a way of getting attention without even trying. She'd show up at family gatherings with a new haircut, a new boyfriend, or a ridiculous story about something she did on a whim, and everyone would gather around her, laughing and indulging her. Meanwhile, I was the steady, reliable one, getting things done, quietly excelling, but never quite getting the same admiration. It wasn't as if I needed approval, but I started to realize how much I wanted to be seen. I wanted to be appreciated for all the work I'd put in, for the fact that I wasn't living paycheck to paycheck, for the sacrifices I'd made to make sure I could afford the life I wanted. But somehow, my accomplishments always seemed to fade into the background compared to her latest adventure. That said, I loved my sister. We were family after all, and despite the underlying tension between us, there was still a bond there. Our parents were a source of both support and frustration, as they always seemed to gravitate toward her carefree lifestyle, praising her for being so full of life, while often overlooking my more stable, quieter contributions. It hurt more than I let on, but I'd long since learned to keep my feelings to myself. After all, I was the responsible one. One evening when I'd gotten home after a particularly long day, I noticed a notification on my phone that would change everything. It was an alert from my credit card company, something about a charge that seemed a little unusual. At first, I assumed it was a mistake. Maybe I had used the wrong card when booking a work trip or made a purchase I had forgotten about. But when I opened the notification, my stomach dropped. A charge of nearly $3,000 was made for a luxury resort booking, and the name on the receipt wasn't mine. I sat there, staring at the screen, my mind racing. I double-checked the details. It was for a high-end resort in a tropical destination I had always wanted to visit, somewhere far out of my price range. But the kicker? The booking was made for 2 people. Panic surged through me. I called the customer service number and had them confirm the details. The agent read off the information. A booking for a 5-star hotel, 3 nights, meals included. I felt a surge of anger rising in my chest as I realized what had happened. It was my sister. There was no other explanation. I tried to tell myself it was a mistake. Maybe it was a mix-up, a random charge, but deep down, I knew. She had used my credit card, without asking, to book a luxury vacation for herself and her friends. Her idea of a surprise gift was to treat herself to a trip on my dime, without a second thought. I could almost hear her, all wide-eyed and cheerful, claiming she thought I'd be thrilled to treat her to something special. I could feel my hands shaking as I dialed her number, the anger simmering under my skin. When she picked up, her voice was all sweetness, like nothing was wrong. "Hey, I've got the best surprise for you! I booked us a weekend getaway! It's going to be amazing! Just wait until you see where we're going!" I couldn't keep the frustration out of my voice. "What do you mean you booked us a getaway? With my credit card?" The line went silent for a moment, followed by a nervous laugh. "Oh yeah, I thought you'd be okay with it. It's going to be so fun. A little vacation for you and me, and we deserve it, right? My heart was pounding now. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. No, I deserve it. You stole my card and made a reservation without asking. There was a pause, and I could almost hear her backpedaling. Come on, it's just a surprise. It's no big deal. It'll be fun, you'll see. No, it's a big deal, and I'm canceling everything. I ended the call before she could say anything else. I sat there, staring at my phone, trying to calm down. My hands were still shaking, but I knew I had to take control. I immediately locked my cards and canceled the booking. There was no way I was going to let her get away with this, but I wasn't done. I was going to expose her to the family. If she thought she could take advantage of me like this, then I was going to make sure everyone knew what she had done. I wasn't going to be the one overlooked anymore. And so, the wheels were set in motion. The moment I hung up on my sister, the reality of what had just happened began to sink in. I'd always been the one to keep my cool, to think things through before reacting. But now, as I sat there in the silence of my apartment, I felt this flood of emotions: betrayal, rage, disbelief. I had to act quickly, but the anger was boiling over, and every time I thought about how casually she'd taken my credit card and booked herself an all-inclusive vacation, my blood pressure spiked. I didn't even wait until the next day. I grabbed my laptop, locked my credit cards, and immediately contacted the resort to cancel the reservation. I could hear my sister's voice in my head, all chirpy and lighthearted, thinking she was doing something sweet. "A surprise!" she'd said, as if I would be grateful to pay for her dream vacation. What was supposed to be a pleasant, carefree trip was now a financial nightmare for me. It wasn't just the money, it was the principle of it. My sister had crossed a line I'd never thought she would. She didn't just borrow something from me, she made a decision for me without even thinking to ask. And now, she wasn't even sorry for it. I could already imagine how she'd spin it when I confronted her, how she'd dismiss my feelings and make it sound like I was being petty or controlling. The phone call was inevitable. I knew I had to face her, and as much as I hated the idea of going down this road, I wasn't about to let her off the hook. I took a deep breath and dialed her number, bracing myself for whatever nonsense she'd try to feed me. When she answered, there was that familiar sweetness in her voice, like nothing was wrong. "Hey, what's up? I was just about to pack for the trip. You're going to love it." I tried to keep my voice steady, but I could feel the anger creeping up. "You mean my trip, right? The one you booked on my credit card without asking?" There was a moment of silence on the other end. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head, trying to come up with an excuse. "Oh, that, yeah. I figured it would be a fun surprise for you. You've been working so hard, and I wanted to treat you to something nice." It was almost laughable. Almost. "You didn't treat me to anything. You treated yourself to a vacation on my dime, without even asking." She let out a nervous laugh, trying to brush it off. "Come on, you're overreacting. It's not like I'm keeping the money. It's just a little trip. Don't you want to have fun too?" "Fun? You've got to be kidding me. You didn't even think to ask me first. That's not a gift. That's just you using me to pay for your vacation, and you know it. I didn't think you'd mind. It's going to be great. I've got everything planned out already. You'll love it. You don't need to worry about a thing." I felt my chest tighten. She was acting like I was the one being unreasonable, like I had no right to be upset that she'd taken advantage of me, completely disregarded my feelings. "No, you don't get it. I never agreed to this, and I'm canceling it all." She was quiet for a second, probably trying to figure out how to wiggle out of this. Okay, I'm sorry, but it's already done. We're going to have so much fun together." I was done listening to her excuses. I took a deep breath, my hands gripping the phone so tightly I thought it might crack. "I'm not going, and I'm canceling everything right now. I already locked my cards. You're not going on this trip, and you're not charging me for it." There was a sharp intake of breath on her end. "You can't just cancel it. It's already paid for, and it's all planned out. You're embarrassing me." You embarrassed me, taking my money and doing whatever you wanted with it. I'll deal with the consequences of canceling, but I'm not going to let you walk all over me. You're not going anywhere." Her voice changed then, slightly defensive, but mostly pleading. "Come on, don't make this a big deal. You know I didn't mean any harm. I just thought it would be fun. I'm sorry, okay? I didn't mean to upset you." I was beyond trying to explain myself. "I don't care about your excuses. You crossed a line, and now you're going to face the consequences." She huffed. "This is so embarrassing, you know that? I can't believe you're making me look like the bad guy in front of everyone. What are they going to think when I tell them what you did?" I was silent for a moment. The bitterness in her voice stung. She wasn't even remotely acknowledging the damage she'd done. She was more concerned about how she was going to look to the family than about the fact that she'd stolen from me. "I don't care what they think anymore," I said, my voice low and steady. "You're going to have to deal with your actions. And trust me, they'll understand. They'll know exactly what you did." The line went dead silent for a long time. I wasn't sure if she was still processing everything or if she was just too angry to respond. But in that silence, I felt a small sense of victory. I had done what I should have done from the beginning. I had drawn a line in the sand, and for once, I wasn't going to let her walk all over me. When she finally spoke again, her voice was tight with frustration. "You've really ruined this, you know that? I didn't ask for this confrontation. I just wanted to surprise you." I didn't respond right away. I could feel the tension creeping up, but I was calm now, clear-headed. "And I'm done letting you use me to fund your fun. I'm canceling the trip, and I'll be telling the family exactly what happened." She swore under her breath and hung up. I stared at my phone for a moment, a strange mix of satisfaction and disbelief washing over me. This wasn't over. I wasn't done yet. I was going to make sure everyone knew what she'd done. The storm had just begun. The days that followed my phone call with my sister were filled with an uncomfortable tension I couldn't shake. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. At first, I thought maybe I was overreacting after all. It was just a vacation, right? But then I realized it wasn't about the trip at all. It was about the disrespect, the entitlement, and the complete disregard for my boundaries. Every time I replayed that conversation in my mind, the same sick feeling crept into my stomach. My sister didn't see what she had done wrong. She still thought she was entitled to my money, my time, and my life choices. She didn't even apologize. She just tried to make it sound like I was the one in the wrong. I was the one who ruined everything by standing up for myself. The worst part? The guilt trips she was starting to pull with the family. She had already called our parents, probably painting herself as the victim in this situation, telling them how I had embarrassed her by canceling everything and making her look bad. She was good at that, twisting the narrative to make herself the innocent party, always able to turn everything on its head and make me the villain. I could already feel the familiar ache of being painted as the bad guy in this family dynamic. Ever since we were kids, my sister had mastered the art of turning everyone's attention onto her with her dramatic flair. Whether it was a broken nail or a heartfelt "I'm misunderstood" speech, she knew exactly how to get the spotlight on herself. And once again, I was the one being accused of ruining everything. I couldn't let her get away with it. I couldn't just let it slide. It was a Friday when I got the first text from our mother. It was a short message, but the subtext was obvious. "Your sister says you've canceled a surprise for her. Can we talk about this?" I almost laughed. Could we talk? Of course we could. But I knew it wasn't going to be a conversation. It was going to be another round of me defending my actions, another round of me trying to explain myself to people who never really saw my side. I put my phone down and walked around my apartment, running my fingers over the furniture. It felt so lonely in here, so quiet. I hadn't realized how much the pressure of the situation had been weighing on me. It was like the whole family was on her side, and I was the one who had to explain myself, but I didn't want to explain anymore. I was done being the one who had to justify every decision. I wasn't her enabler anymore. I took a deep breath, composed a response, and sent it. I've already told her why I did it. It's not just about the trip, it's about her repeatedly taking advantage of me and crossing boundaries. I'm not going to let that slide anymore. This isn't a surprise gift. This is manipulation. I'm not interested in having a conversation where I'm blamed for setting a boundary. I hit send, feeling a rush of defiance. It wasn't the response I wanted to give, but it was the one I needed. I wasn't going to let anyone tell me I was wrong for standing up for myself. Later that night, the phone calls began. First, it was my father. His voice was calm, but I could hear the concern in his tone. "I heard you're not going on the trip," he said, his words careful. "I know this is a tough situation, but you can't just cancel everything like that. It's not right." I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, fighting the anger rising in me again. "Dad, you don't get it," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "This wasn't a surprise. This was my sister taking advantage of me. She used my card without asking, and when I confronted her, she made it sound like I was the one being unreasonable." There was a long pause before he spoke again. "You know how she is, honey. She's always had a way of pushing people around, but she's also your sister. Families should be able to work things out without tearing each other apart." His words stung. I could hear the unspoken message. You're the one causing the problem. But I couldn't go back on what I'd said. I couldn't let my sister get away with manipulating everyone. "I'm not the one causing the problem," I replied, feeling a mix of anger and exhaustion. "I've tried to be patient, but I've had enough. She's been using me for years, and I'm done letting it happen. This is the last time I'm going to let her walk all over me. If that makes me the bad guy, then so be it." Another silence. I could feel the weight of the conversation hanging in the air. I wasn't going to back down, but I could already tell where this was going. My father sighed. "You know I love you, right? But maybe you're overreacting. This is something you could have handled differently." I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I simply said, "I've made my decision. You can't expect me to keep letting her do this." The call ended shortly after that, and I was left standing in the middle of my apartment, feeling like I was sinking into the floor. It wasn't just about the trip anymore. It was about years of feeling taken advantage of. Years of watching my sister skate by while I did all the heavy lifting, both emotionally and financially. The next day, I was confronted by my sister, though this time, it wasn't over the phone. She showed up unannounced at my door. I opened it cautiously, my stomach churning. "What are you doing here?" "I came to talk," she said, folding her arms across her chest. "You've ruined everything. Do you even care about me at all? You're making me look like a fool." I could feel the tension in my chest growing. This wasn't a conversation, it was another attempt to guilt trip me. I wasn't in the mood for her manipulation anymore. "Listen," I started, trying to keep calm. "You used my credit card without asking, and when I confronted you about it, you played the victim. This is about more than just a vacation. It's about you constantly taking advantage of me and crossing boundaries that I've set for years. I'm done being your doormat," she scoffed. "Oh, please! You're making a mountain out of a molehill. I was trying to do something nice. Why do you always have to make everything so difficult?" "No," I said, my voice cold. "You were doing something nice for you, not for me. I'm done, okay? You don't get to manipulate me anymore. Not with guilt, not with promises, not with your little surprises." Her eyes narrowed, and I saw the flicker of frustration in them. "You're just like everyone else acting like I'm the problem. Fine, but don't expect me to forget what you've done." I leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms. "I'm not expecting you to forget, but I am expecting you to understand that I'm not the one who messed this up." She stormed off, slamming the door behind her, leaving me standing there with a sense of finality. As I watched her walk away, something inside me shifted. This wasn't just about protecting my money anymore, it was about standing up for myself, about refusing to let her manipulate me any longer. I knew there would be consequences, but I also knew I was finally taking control of my life. The days following my confrontation with my sister felt like a slow-motion train wreck. I couldn't shake the feeling that things were spiraling out of my control. Every time I saw a message or heard from a family member, I braced myself for more of the same my sister's dramatics, her playing the victim, and me once again being painted as the villain. I was still reeling from the conversation with my dad. His words, "You're overreacting," haunted me. I wasn't overreacting. I was standing up for myself for the first time in years. I wasn't going to let anyone, not even my sister, tell me I had no right to defend myself. Yet the guilt gnawed at me. My father's disappointment, my mother's concerned texts, the way they made me feel like I was causing a rift in the family, it was all overwhelming. But what hurt more was seeing how easily they took my sister's side. She was, after all, the one who knew how to stir up emotions, the one who wore her heart on her sleeve and made everyone around her feel like they owed her something. I had spent so many years trying to be the good daughter, the one who followed the rules and did the right thing, yet I was always overshadowed by her antics. I tried to keep my distance, to stick to my guns. I knew I couldn't let this slide, but the emotional toll it was taking on me was unbearable. And then it happened. The family dinner invitation, it was from my mom. "We need to talk. It's time we all came together and cleared the air. Dinner at our place Sunday night." I stared at the text, my heart pounding. Sunday night. The day I had been dreading. It wasn't just a dinner. It was the moment when everything would come to a head. My sister was already telling everyone how badly I'd treated her, how I embarrassed her, how I made her feel worthless. She was playing the martyr, and I was the villain in her version of the story. I didn't want to go. I didn't want to sit at that table, to hear her make me out to be the bad guy again. But I knew I had no choice. It was time to confront this once and for all. When I walked into the house that Sunday evening, the tension was palpable. My mom was bustling in the kitchen, preparing dinner, while my dad sat at the table, his usual calm demeanor replaced with a slight unease. My sister was already there, sitting at the table, tapping her fingers impatiently. The moment I walked in, she gave me that look sharp, accusing, as if I was the one who had wronged her. I didn't say anything at first. I knew the drill by now. She'd try to make the first move, pretend to be the wounded one. And sure enough, she didn't disappoint. "Nice of you to join us," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. I kept my eyes on her, refusing to let her bait me. "I'm here," I said flatly, my voice steady. The dinner started in silence, each of us picking at our plates, the air thick with unspoken words. My mom glanced at my sister, then at me, clearly uncomfortable with the tension. She cleared her throat. "Maybe we should just talk about this like adults. No more secrets. No more drama." I could hear the hesitation in her voice, like she wasn't sure who she was speaking to. My sister, the charming one, or me, the one who was apparently the troublemaker now. I could already tell how this was going to go. I glanced at my sister, who was now looking at me with that familiar hurt expression. She was so good at it. She knew exactly how to twist everything, how to make me feel guilty for standing up for myself. I wasn't going to fall for it anymore. "You know," my sister began, her voice softening, "I really thought you'd be happy for me. I thought I was doing something nice, trying to surprise you with a little getaway, but instead, you turned it into this huge thing, and now I'm the bad guy. You've really hurt me, you know?" My hands clenched around my fork. This was the same routine I'd heard 1,000 times, the same manipulation. It was never about what she had done, it was always about what I had done to her. "You're not the victim here," I said, cutting through her pity party. "You took my credit card without asking, and when I confronted you, you tried to turn it around and make me feel like I was in the wrong. You don't get to do that anymore." My mom immediately interjected, her tone frantic. "We're all family here, can't we just—" "No," I snapped, my voice louder now. "No, we can't just move past it. Because this isn't just about a trip. This is about years of me letting her take advantage of me, years of her walking all over me and getting away with it, and me always being the one to smooth things over, to keep the peace. I've had enough." My sister looked taken aback, her jaw tightening. "You're crazy. You're really going to make me out to be the villain here, aren't you? No, I said, standing up from the table. You're making yourself the villain by using me, by making me pay for your mistakes, and now you're trying to make me feel guilty for it. That's what you've been doing all these years. I turned to my parents, my eyes scanning their faces. I've been the one trying to do everything right. I've been the one who always helps out, who always supports you, and what do I get in return? Guilt? Manipulation? I'm done being the one who carries the burden for everyone else, and I'm done letting her think she can use me for whatever she wants. The silence that followed was deafening. My sister was visibly shaking, her face flushed with a mix of anger and humiliation. For the first time in years, I didn't feel bad for her. I felt empowered. And then, it happened. My mom, who had been silent up until this point, finally spoke, her voice trembling. Maybe we've all been enabling this behavior. Maybe we've all been blind to how much she's been taking from you. She turned to my sister. You can't just keep using people like this. It's not fair. My sister's face crumpled, but not in the way I expected. Instead of guilt, I saw something else. A flicker of realization, like she was finally understanding the gravity of what she had done. But it didn't last long. She stood up abruptly, throwing her napkin down. I don't need to be here for this, she snapped, her voice low. I don't need this kind of treatment from anyone. Before anyone could respond, she stormed out of the house, leaving the rest of us in stunned silence. I stood there, my heart pounding in my chest, not sure whether to feel relief or anger. But as I looked at my parents, really looked at them, I realized something. I had finally done what I needed to do. I had stood up for myself, and for once, it felt like I was the one in control. My mom looked at me with a mix of sadness and understanding. We'll figure this out, she said softly, her voice full of regret. We'll make it right. I nodded, but in my heart, I knew that it wasn't about making things right with her. It was about me finally taking back my life, about reclaiming my peace. And in that moment, I realized that was enough. The days following the dinner were filled with an uneasy quiet that I hadn't expected. The storm had passed, but the aftermath still hung in the air, thick with unresolved tension. My sister didn't speak to me for a week. My parents were more cautious, their conversations with me laced with an awkwardness I hadn't felt before. And while the house felt like it was holding its breath, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of liberation. The best way I can describe the next few days is like standing in the eye of a storm. Everything had been chaotic, but now there was a strange calm, almost a stillness, where for the first time I was allowed to just breathe. I wasn't carrying anyone else's emotional burden, and for the first time in forever, I wasn't responsible for smoothing things over. I spent those first few days focusing on myself, on putting together the pieces of my life that had gotten so scattered over the years. I wasn't angry anymore, not with my sister, not with my parents, but I wasn't about to let myself slip back into old habits of constantly sacrificing for others at my own expense. I took the time to do things I hadn't done in ages. I went for walks in the park, reconnected with old friends I hadn't seen in months, and even booked a weekend getaway of my own. It was smaller, quieter, but it was mine. I'd always put others first, especially my sister, but for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to be the priority. It wasn't just the trip that felt like a victory, it was everything. I had finally learned to say no without guilt. I had learned that it was okay to draw boundaries, even with family, and that was something I could carry with me for the rest of my life. Then, almost exactly a week later, I got a call from my sister. Her voice, once so sharp and defensive, now sounded small and tired. "Can we talk?" she asked, barely above a whisper. I want to apologize." I wasn't sure what to expect. She could have easily kept her distance or tried to keep playing the victim, but this sounded different. Her usual bravado was gone, replaced by something I hadn't heard in years: vulnerability. I agreed to meet her, but I wasn't sure if I was ready. It had been such a long time since I'd seen this side of her, and I wasn't entirely sure I wanted to open myself up again. But part of me knew that if I didn't give her a chance now, I'd regret it. We met at a small cafe, the kind that had been a favorite of ours when we were younger. The familiarity of it made me uneasy, like walking into an old memory I wasn't sure I wanted to revisit. When she arrived, she didn't sit across from me like usual. Instead, she slid into the seat next to me, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. "I don't really know where to start," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "I guess I owe you a real apology. I was selfish. I didn't think about how my actions were hurting you. I wanted something for myself, and I didn't consider what I was taking from you in the process." I stayed quiet, watching her carefully. I didn't want to interrupt, didn't want to rush her. Part of me still wanted to be angry, but the other part of me, the part that had spent years trying to be the peacekeeper, just wanted to hear her say what I had needed to hear. "I've been thinking about it a lot," she continued, her voice low, "about how you always do everything right, and I just take. I thought I was entitled to your help, your support, your everything, and I never once considered how that made you feel. You've been there for me my whole life, and I took that for granted." Her words hit me harder than I expected. I had heard her apologize before, but this time felt different. There was no defensiveness, no excuses. It was just her, raw and honest. For the first time, I saw the cracks in her armor, the part of her that I had never been allowed to see, the part that wasn't just my sister, but a person who had been struggling too. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm sorry for everything." It wasn't easy, but I could see that she was truly sorry. There had been no justification, no minimization of her actions. She had taken full responsibility, and I wasn't used to seeing her this way. For a long time, I had felt like I had to carry the emotional weight for both of us, but now, in this moment, it felt like she was finally carrying her own. I took a deep breath and reached for my coffee cup, taking a moment to process everything. "I appreciate that," I said finally, my voice steady but quiet. "I've always wanted you to see how your actions affected me, and I'm glad you finally do. But I'm also glad that I stood up for myself. I wasn't sure I could do it. I wasn't sure you'd ever understand, but now, I think you do." Her eyes softened, and she nodded slowly. "I do, and I'm sorry for putting you in that position. You've always been the responsible one, the one who never asks for anything, but I see now that I was leaning on you too much, and that's not fair." There was a long pause between us, and in that silence, I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't hurt. I wasn't even upset. There was just this quiet sense of relief, like a weight had been lifted from my chest. "I don't know if things will go back to the way they were," I said softly, "but maybe that's okay. Maybe we don't need to go back. Maybe we just need to move forward." She smiled, and for the first time in years, it wasn't a smug, knowing smile. It was genuine, free of any bitterness. "I think that sounds good." And just like that, everything shifted. The past didn't matter anymore. The fight, the resentment, the manipulation, it was all in the rearview mirror now. What mattered was the future. In the weeks that followed, things were still awkward at times, but they were different. The tension was gone. My sister and I began to find a new rhythm in our relationship, one that was based on mutual respect instead of manipulation. She didn't expect me to fix everything for her anymore, and I didn't feel like I had to carry her weight, and I didn't just let my guard down for her. I started to protect myself, to prioritize my needs. I wasn't going to let anyone, not even family, cross the lines I had set for myself. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done, but it was the best thing for me. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had reclaimed control over my life, and that was worth more than any vacation, any apology, or any family gathering could ever give me.